Welcome to Where You're At, a podcast that highlights the work of alumni from the Journalism and Media Studies Department at San Diego State University. I'm Pete Frank Williams. Our goal is to share the success of alums, inspire current students with these stories, and connect students and alums for mentoring. And now, here's your host, Josh Shushan.
This week on Where You At, we are heading north to Los Angeles. We're going to talk journalism and also media relations. I'm really excited about this week's episode because our guest is Greg Risling, and he attended San Diego State from 1989 to 1994. He spent 2 decades as a reporter, worked for numerous newspapers, including the Los Angeles Times. He spent a long time working for the Associated Press. And these days, he works for the LA County District Attorney's Office. He's been a public information officer, media relations. And so I think it's really good that we learn 2 different things that he's done. And so, Greg, welcome to Where You At. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me. Like I've said, I'm very flattered and humbled that I'm here with you and talking all things journalism and media relations. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I don't like to go chronological. I kind of like to dive right in. And so I want to start with the switch that you made, because I think it's helpful for students who are trying to figure out what their path is going to be within communications, or even for alums who are thinking maybe it's time for me to try something different within communications. So again, 2 decades as a reporter roughly, and then you make the decision to switch over and do media relations. Tell us what went into that decision. Why did you do it? What factors led to it?
Yeah, for Associated Press, I had been there for, more than a decade. I think I was approaching 15 years. And, I was in Los Angeles. It's a bureau that was staffed 24 hours a day. So you needed to work the overnight shift, weekends, nights, week by week, the schedule varied. And, when you get later on in life, priorities change, challenges arise. And I needed to be in more of a 9 to 5 schedule. And so that was kind of the primary reason why, number one. And then 2, journalism, the landscape was changing a little bit. As you know, a lot of corporations were buying news outlets, and news outlets were getting reduced. They were getting cut down to the core. And a place like Associated Press, people were leaving. And I was like, wow, what is going on with that? And, the media landscape is much bigger now than it was when I first started. You had a certain amount of TV stations, certain amount of newspapers. Now you've got all sorts of online publications. So there's a lot more opportunity out there. For me, I thought, you know what, I did graduate San Diego State with a PR emphasis. Maybe it's time. And then the opportunity had come up at the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office to possibly come on board. And so I applied, and, through a couple of machinations, I eventually got the job.
So I remember when I left the newspaper world, I'd spent 10 years at the Oakland Tribune, which at the time was the flagship of Bay Area News Group. And we had just merged with the Contra Costa Times and the San Jose Mercury News. And I remember thinking that this is probably the time for me to leave and to go on a different path. And when I was thinking about this decision, there were so many different people who I needed to call, mentors of mine. When you're making a decision like this, who are the people that you rely on just to kind of help think through the process?
Well, first of all, I want to let you know I'm from Alameda. So I read the Oakland Tribune as a kid all the time, and the Alameda Times-Star, RIP. So for me, the people that I entrusted were people that had been in the business for a while, or who were in positions they had already made that transition. There was a colleague of mine, or is now, he works at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he had worked at the LA Times many moons ago as a stringer. He's the main spokesperson for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles. So I talked to him. I talked to a few other people that, was this the right move? Because my bread and butter was always news writing, and going into something where you're, cheerleading, for lack of a better word, for somebody all the time wasn't in my objective nature, but it was something I was going to be receptive to. So that it wasn't a hard decision for me, just because where I was in my life. But again, with any job, you have to make that transition. And that transition period can always be a little bit scary, but it's worked out.
How much did your journalism background When you were applying for the job and when they're thinking about hiring you, how much was that attractive to you, and how much do you think that has helped you knowing what it takes to be a journalist and now working with them on the other side?
I think so. Working at the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, when I worked at Associated Press, I was the, lack for a better word, the sidekick to a legendary journalist. Her name was Linda Deutsch. She covered everything from the Manson trial to Michael Jackson to OJ. She was the Helen Thomas of AP court reporting. And so I would cover the federal courts, she would cover the state courts, but when she was busy with a big trial, I would cover it in her stead. And so people kind of knew me in the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office as a court reporter, even though I was a general assignment reporter for the most part. So that definitely helped me out. And, it's important to know how the court system works. It's important to know how your state court system works, and it's important to know how the federal court system works. So I cut my teeth that way at AP, and that helped me probably land this job.
How would you describe the changes from you're a reporter and you want to get all the information possible? We want every single possible nugget that we can get as reporters. We're competitive. We want to beat out somebody. We want to have, whether it's one little thing or a whole bunch of little things or one enormous thing, we want to have something that other reporters don't have. And now you're in a position where you only want to share a certain amount of information, that is necessary. Give me what this transformation has been like for you in that regard.
Well, it's funny you say that. Like the first or second week I got to the DA's office, we get something internally that's not for the public. It's a statement it basically gives an outline of the case. And this case that I remember, it was a Hollywood high school retired teacher, and the defendant was a guy who just got out of New York prison for manslaughter or murder or something like that. He was a pen pal with this teacher. He came to move out here and live with the guy for a while, and he killed him, and he confessed to it. And I thought, oh, wow, like he confessed. That's awesome. I can put that in the news release. And I went, whoa, whoa, whoa. A defendant has a right to a fair trial, right? You can't put like everything that's in this piece of paper. So for that, it was a real quick learning curve. Like, okay, yes, we can put what we want in the release, but we can't put all the information out there because you just can't. That's not fair to the person who's being arrested and being charged by our office. So I learned pretty quick, but it was good to see kind of the things as a reporter. You're like, oh, it's a new door open. I get to see something that I probably wouldn't have seen before. And I've told reporters this who I've known for a while. Literally, it takes sometimes when you're a reporter and you ask for a comment and they say no comment, and it takes the whole day, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, why did it take all day to know? Now I know why it takes all day for a no comment, because there's some back and forth between people. They're trying to figure out if we're going to say something, we're not going to say something, or we're going to hurt the case at all. So it's a whole process, and journalists on the other side don't understand that. But the people who I know now, I'm like, hey, dude, you got to bear with me. Sorry.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I want to dive a little bit more into just the relationships with reporters. I don't know how many of them at one point were colleagues of yours versus how many of them don't even know that you were once a reporter. I don't know if street cred is the right or court cred. It would be the right phrase for a reporter who knows this guy once did what I'm doing and how that relationship is enhanced by it.
I don't think I think that a lot of the reporters I deal with now are younger and they probably don't know. And that's fine. I mean, I've never been one to boast or brag about where I've been and what I've done. And I've never done that in my current job right now. Like, hey, man, I used to work for Associated Press, or I used to work for the Los Angeles Times. The reporters, there's a handful of them that are left that either I worked with at AP or the LA Times. And they're people that obviously know, like, I don't have to ask the basic questions, or I know exactly what to ask. And it's not a chess game per se, but they know I can only say certain things, you know what I mean, to them, and they're going to be respectful of that. So, yeah, I don't mind at all. I mean, if somebody looks me up on LinkedIn and go, oh, he's not, lack for a better word again, flack, or, just a PR person, he's somebody who's got the career and experience of being on this side, then so be it. But I don't think a lot of reporters do that these days.
How long did it take before you felt like, okay, this is now who I am. Like I remember I spent 10 years as a newspaper reporter. And when I hit the 10-year mark doing broadcasting, I remember thinking, wow, I can't believe that I've now spent an equal amount of time doing both. And now I've spent way more time broadcasting than writing. But I always kind of feel in my heart that I'm just like a journalist, and even if I'm just describing a baseball game, I feel like, this is a really fun, type of journalism. I'm just describing a baseball game as it's happening, but I still kind of just feel like that's in my DNA. And so I'm wondering like what your DNA is and when you felt like I'm no longer a reporter, I'm really truly, a public relations.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always had the writing gene in me, and it'll never go away. I mean, I do some writing on the side for different organizations and volunteering and whatnot. But as far as being a PR person, I knew it was probably going to be a transition at some point in my life. I could have stayed at Associated Press. There was no constraints on me to leave. I just knew for me personally, I wanted to try something different. And my wife and I are two total true crime buffs. We watch Dateline and 48 Hours religiously. So I probably shouldn't say that working for the DA's office, but it just was a natural fit. And if I went to go work for a water district or some other agency where I didn't have that expertise, I probably wouldn't be there. But I'm going on 9 years at the DA's office now, so I've made the right move, I think.
You mentioned earlier how long it might take just to get a no comment. Give us, you don't have to go through hour, but give us the sense of some of the most important day-to-day responsibilities that you have, the different people that you need to talk to in order to effectively do your job.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we've got everything from media inquiries could be dozens just for one case. It could be the Harvey Weinstein case. It could be some major case that happened over the weekend and people want to know. You could get dozens of inquiries just on one case alone. We've get a lot of requests to interview prosecutors for these shows like Dateline and 48 Hours and Oxygen and et cetera, et cetera. And then there's policy issues. There's, that we have to we put out policies that we let the people know about. There's news conferences, so we have to write talking points sometimes. So there's a wide range of responsibilities in media relations. We also have like a public affairs unit. We have a video and graphics unit. So we've got a pretty robust group that handle all sorts of facets of communicating with the public.
When it comes to those Dateline and On the Case with Paula Zahn, I like watching those as well. There's a book that I wrote that's been featured on numerous shows that are like that. For you and your colleagues, what goes into the decision making on we will participate with this, or we will completely participate, or we'll just do what we have to do, or we don't want to make prosecutors and other people available for this type of show? Is there any criteria, or what goes into making those calls?
I think when you talk about those types of shows, we typically tell first of all, it's the prosecutor's decision at the end of the day. Do they want to be interviewed for that or not? Secondly, we give them the advice is you probably want your case closed. You want it completed before you go on a major national TV show and talk about it. Only for the fact is because you don't want to jeopardize your case. And they know that. I mean, most of these prosecutors have been in the office for a long time. Sometimes we will have prosecutors that are kind of newer and they've been assigned a case maybe, and a reporter has reached out to them directly, or it's a high profile case and they ask us for advice and say, hey, I know you're in media relations. What do you suggest we do in this situation? And we always want to err on the side of caution because, again, we don't want to jeopardize anybody's case, and especially in media relations, what we put out there, whatever it's a statement by myself or somebody else in the office, like we want to make sure it's accurate, it's correct, it's factual, and we don't have a negative effect on the case, because that's the last thing I want from my position is, oh my God, they had to drop the charges, or you said something out of, that a defense attorney can seize upon and all that kind of stuff. So I have to be wary of that. But, being in this position for as long as I have, you kind of know the ropes.
And watching a lot of those shows now, Look, it's your job to highlight the hard work that people do, that police officers do, that investigators do, especially when it comes to a cold case, and not giving up on things like that, and helping family members get answers to these types of things. How much of a joy do you get in being able to highlight the work of colleagues and being able to shine the light on the work they do?
I think it's important. I mean, prosecutors, the DA's office is one side of the coin. You can work at a public defender's office or at a firm where they're defense attorneys, and they've got the other side of the coin. I think it's a fascinating story. I was always intrigued sitting in court. It could be a criminal case. It could be a civil case. It could be a divorce proceeding. I covered a lot of different things when I was a reporter, and you'd always hear both sides, and it's always left up to obviously the jurors or the judge in some cases that have to make the final decision. I don't sit in many of the interviews anymore, but I sat in for the 30 for 30 on OJ, which was like a 10-piece documentary. It's fascinating. And the last prosecutor who was still in the office, they interviewed him. And he told this story. He was one of the main prosecutors on the case. And he told this story about how he would go every day underneath the underground parking lot at the criminal justice building. And there was this guy who, say hi to him every day and stuff like that. And, when the verdict came back and he was acquitted, OJ was acquitted, he came out and he was ready to leave for the day. And the parking lot attendant said, "Hey, listen, I know that really stinks. And I feel for you." And he says, "Well, thanks." And he goes, "Hey, I just want to let you know I've been in your shoes before." And he said, "What do you mean?" He said, "My son was murdered X amount of years ago. And the first criminal trial that took place in this building, murder trial, was my son's murder. And the murderer was acquitted, or the defendant, I should say." And so they had a bonding experience. And that little snippet never made it into the 30 for 30. But I was like, you're sitting there and you want to get a bag of popcorn or something. Like, this guy has got so many stories. Forget about just the case itself. It's all the things that wrapped around that whole, circus, so to speak. And those are the kinds of things that interest me.
That OJ 30 for 30 was brilliantly done. We were in college when all of that happened. I followed that case super close, and I remember reading about it constantly. And I think just about everything that's ever been done on TV, I have watched. That 30 for 30 was so brilliantly done, I thought. What other tidbits from being a part of helping ESPN with that stand out to you that you really enjoyed, that was meaningful to you?
Well, they take the time. I think the interview took of this particular person most of the day, I think. And I think, I love rich storytelling. And if you have the opportunity, whatever organization you belong to tell the story in such a way that it gives you the full perspective. He had 10 episodes to write that story, right? And most of the people had heard that story before, but they hadn't heard it from the people that were directly involved to that degree, I think. And I think that was important. And I wanted to cut my teeth initially in sports journalism. So, I envy you and all the other people who have made it in that little niche, because it is a tough one to break into. And so for me, it was just cool to sit in on, and anything that I can listen to and take away from that maybe other people don't hear, then it's not a secret, but it's just like, oh wow, I get to hear that, and I got to know that. That's kind of cool.
It's time for a quick break from this week's podcast. I'm Amy J. Smith from the class of '98, and I'm a voiceover artist based in Los Angeles. I'm available for film narration, radio and TV commercials, documentaries, how-to explainer videos, and much more. You can contact me at amyvo.com. And now, back to this week's podcast. Here's Josh.
Let's rewind. You're a freshman in college. What did you think that you wanted to do with your life? And if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to 18-year-old Greg who's starting at San Diego State?
Oh boy. Go to your classes. No, I'm kidding. No, I went to San Diego State and I knew I wanted to be in the journalism program. What had happened was I was at Alameda High School and we had a bunch of average athletes and you can only play so many average athletes. So I got cut a couple times. And so I said, well, what can I do? And I started writing for the school newspaper on the sports page. And my first beat was like water polo. I knew nothing about water polo. I'm like, what am I doing? I know what the score is and I don't know what goes on. But anyways, so what happened was I kept doing the sports reporting, just basically writing about my friends. I thought, well, this is cool. And I got an award and for, I don't know, best sports journalist at some conference in the Bay Area. And I thought, oh, maybe that's something I should do. So I just applied to a bunch of schools, and San Diego State was far enough away from the Bay Area, far enough away from my parents, but close enough. And I love San Diego. And so I went in knowing that I wanted to do that. I just didn't know kind of what parameters, because I know news writing didn't pay a lot. And part of me was like, how am I going to make a living out of this? But it was my strength. So the advice I would give my 18-year-old self and current students would be try everything, try a little bit of radio and TV, try the emphasis back then were advertising, PR, radio, TV, and news writing. I knew I was going to do advertising. I did KCR. I did the Aztec games. I sounded horrible, as you can tell. I can't wait to hear myself on this podcast. I didn't have the mug for TV. So it boiled down to news writing and public relations. And so back then, I don't know if you remember, did you have to take the GSP test?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I failed it twice.
Yep. And you had to, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
You had to pass with a 77.
Yep.
And I remember the first time I took it, I got a 76. And I definitely know I misspelled argument wrong. It was early in the morning. I put it with an E and instead of just with the U. So I took it again. And I got a lower score. I got a 73. So I'm like, oh my God, I can't, you can only take it 3 times. I don't know why my younger self didn't take it the 3rd time, but I basically crashed all my upper level courses at San Diego State. And those were PR courses. I think going in, looking around, seeing what you like, and then focusing on your strength. And my strength happened to be news writing. So that's what I went with.
So many similarities, Greg. And this is the first time that Greg and I have ever talked. We're seeing each other on Zoom. Same thing for me going to San Diego State. It was the furthest place that was still in-state tuition. I was away from home. I could get home quickly if I needed to, but I was not going to come home every weekend. Failed athlete, wanted to work in sports. I think the first time that I took the GSP, I think I got a 71. And I remember thinking, oh, well, I was nervous, so I'll easily pass it the second time. And I got a 59 second time. And then I remember thinking, I better
You're giving me so much confidence right now. I thought I was the only guy that couldn't pass that test.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I better really, really study. I only got one more shot. And I forget my final score, but I just barely passed it. And I'll be honest, I was like, whatever, grammar, spelling, punctuation, I'll eventually figure out where to put commas and semicolons and things like that. And to me, it was just about the story. It wasn't about the grammar. And honestly, it wasn't until I got to the Daily Aztec and when I got to Professor Spevak's class, and Professor Spevak was an absolute stickler. I learned so much from him, even though we butted heads constantly. I know that he went after me harder than he went after other students, which I respect now. At the time, I thought that he was picking on me, but it was super, super important. And now it drives me crazy when I see grammar, spelling, punctuation mistakes. I'm the guy who's at a restaurant and I'll let them know you've got a typo on your menu. Or when someone, writes girls, or it should be women, apostrophe S, but girls basketball, there's no apostrophe. And it drives me crazy when I see girl apostrophe S basketball team. I'm like, no, that's incorrect. It's women apostrophe S basketball team. It's girls basketball team. Spevak taught me this, and it drives me crazy now.
Oh my God. Well, I'm glad you brought up Joe Spevak because I was one guy that I'm in the same fraternity you are with that. I would say my failures at San Diego State, made me the journalist who I am today. One was I couldn't get on the Daily Aztec sports staff. I think it was the guy's name. I don't want to say his name because I can't remember if it's right or not. Anyways, he called me and he said, there was X amount of positions and you were just the next person. I'm like, why do you tell me that? Like, what? Just tell me I didn't get it. And then I went in for a second interview, and it was after a party one night, and I came in with like my hat and I'm like, well, I walked out. I'm like, I'm not getting the job. What? But what I did do is, I don't know your time is not. I think it was Governor Wilson had imposed like a 40% tuition hike on state schools, and so I was writing a lot of op-eds in the paper. But that was one of my failures, and my other failure, which you share obviously, was Joe Spevak. If we could present a mental image of him, crew cut, big glasses, plaid jacket, skinny, kind of, I can't remember his voice, but I thought it was nasally or a little high. He just had this tone about him, and he would go after you. And I never forget, like, the papers that were returned to me on basic news writing. It looked like they were covered in blood. It was that much red on the paper. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to be a journalist. But it's because, like you said, he kind of honed in and taught you the way, like the very basics and how to write a story and what's important. I came back to San Diego State years later. I don't know if I called him ahead of time or emailed him, and I said, hey, listen, I'm in town. Can I drop by your office? And I think I was with Associated Press, and I just said, hey, listen, your red marks, your way probably turned off a lot of kids, but I thrived under that, because I knew if you're going to tear things up for me, I can handle it, and I can go out in the world and do a good job. So I totally appreciate him.
You just brought back so many more memories of Spevak. I remember that in his classes, you couldn't write the second paragraph until you'd written the first paragraph correctly. Mm-hmm. So you would print out that first paragraph, and then any mistakes you would have to fix, and the first paragraph would have to be perfect. And then you could go on to the second paragraph, and same thing before you could go on to the third paragraph. And I remember that he would intentionally not have the answers to certain things. And so you had to go up to him and ask questions. And he had like these like note cards, and he would show you the answer if you asked the question correctly, but you had to ask the question correctly. Mm-hmm. And I remember so many times I would say to him, can you tell me whatever it was? And his response was yes. And I'd say, well, then tell me. And he'd say, like, no, you have to ask the question properly. What you asked was, can you tell me? Yes, I can tell you. He said, ask the question properly. I remember just wanting to just scream and be so mad, like, what I'm trying to ask you. But again, he was a stickler for ask the question properly.
Yeah, and I agree to that. And to this day, now that you say that, when I ask questions, I think I know what the right question is to ask. And I can, no offense to sports journalists sometimes, but, the athletes don't want to answer the question sometimes, because they're like, well, what did you think in that moment? Well, you're not really going to get a good answer probably from that. And the athletes probably don't usually want to give those answers. So I do think the time that I spent at San Diego State and in my early part of my career, learning the ropes and knowing what questions to ask at the right time it was vital.
The other thing that drives me crazy about sports writers and sports broadcasters like myself is when they say, can you just talk about?
Yeah.
You get a generic response when you ask a generic question. And so who, what, where, when, why, how, describe. And those are things I learned from Spevak. Those are things I learned from Professor Wolfmeyer. Mm-hmm. I want to scream when I hear someone say, can you just talk about? No, ask a specific question to get a specific answer.
I agree. And the questions that we get at the district attorney's office are very specific. We don't get something where you're just going to ramble on. I think in sports journalism, I watch those interviews. I've been in some of those when I was in AP. I would pinch hit for covering baseball or basketball playoff games. I helped cover the Breeders' Cup as well too. So, I felt like, okay, I know what questions to ask. But you're not always going to get the response you're hoping for or somebody to open up to you.
I'm fascinated by your time at the Associated Press for the number of different things that you covered and the versatility that is required in order to cover the Breeders' Cup one day and then a court case another day. What were some of the things that you did to make sure that you were not just competent, but that you could cover this correctly, ask the right questions for these stories?
I think you have to be a Swiss knife. I think if you're a journalist, period. Now, is business can I do quarterly earnings? Yeah, I could do it probably, but is that my strong suit? No. Sports, that's my hobbies. That's what I like. So it's a little bit easier. Understanding the court system, takes some time. The advice I would give for young journalists and what I'm seeing on my side is people don't understand the court system. You should know how civic government works. You should know how the court system works. You should know the other things that how society works. So when you're plugged into that, or if you're plugged into that, you'll know how to handle the situation. And so you're right. But with AP, I was a general assignment reporter, and like California has got a bunch of natural disasters, and I always felt like that was a staple of my reporting, because I'd have to go out and cover a wildfire or a mudslide or a storm or something like that. So you had to be good at writing about the weather and that kind of stuff. So yeah, you needed to have that versatility.
The other thing that I think is so interesting about the Associated Press is the frequency in which you write a story in which there is no byline. It's just out there. And let's face it, most people, they want the credit. They want to see their name in the paper or something like that. But also, you never know what country or where in the United States your story or your byline would be. Do you have any memorable anecdotes, or what memorable anecdotes do you have about a story appearing someplace that you never would have imagined it appeared?
Yeah, we've gotten clips. We used to get clips back, and it would be in some foreign language, or the stories did go worldwide. And when you're in Los Angeles, that's one of the epicenters, major cities of where news happens. Recently, probably in the last couple of years, I covered the Lance Armstrong saga, and that was going through the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles. And I was one of them. There was a team of writers. There was a cycling writer. There was writers overseas, because, in France and those types of things. But I was the main anchor. And when the U.S. Attorney's Office decided not to charge him, the story came out of L.A. We wrote it first. We broke the story. There was a 30 for 30 on Lance Armstrong recently, or in the last couple of years. And, they show news stories that just pop up. And one of them popped up. I'm like, that's my story. I'm all, oh my God, I'm on 30 for 30. But nobody knows. Nobody's going to know. For me, I take credit and a little bit of pride in that. Didn't have my name on the story. And I never really cared at Associated Press if my name was on the story to begin with. And I kind of like that anonymity. I know I wrote it. Yes, if it was a big story, did I want to get credit for it? Yeah, in some ways, but I've never been the guy that needed the byline, or I'm just not built that way. I just like, the reason I got into journalism is everybody's got a story to tell. If you're the most uninteresting person, or you're the president of the United States, you've got a story to tell. And I want to hear about it. I want to write about it. And I'm just a vessel for people to go through, and hopefully I do justice in it when I write it. But that's why I got into journalism, and that's why I enjoyed it so much.
One thing that I can tell from listening to you here for the last 30 minutes or so is just the importance of teamwork. And a lot of times we think of teamwork with sports, but teamwork at Associated Press, teamwork at the LA Times, teamwork at the district attorney's office, and what it means to help each other and want to get the story correct, or want to get the information out there for the press. So what would be your advice about being a good teammate and what that means in the worlds of journalism and PR?
In journalism, people do want the byline. They do want the credit. They do want the recognition and appreciation. And I get that. That's important, because it helps morale. It helps, your ego as well too. But most importantly, when you're working at a place like Associated Press or a newspaper or any place where there's multiple people, you need the help. You're not going to be the expert in every genre. And so if it's an entertainment story, you can help out in certain situations. We had to cover elections. There are award shows that the list went on and on and on. And you would rely on the people who knew the best on how to handle a story. And I didn't have much of an ego. So I'm like, well, where do you need help in? Do you need me to make a call to that? Do you need, so it's just important to have humility in that situation and know that you're part of a team. One of the biggest stories I covered was 9/11. I was on the desk. I was doing the overnight show. I think the first rumor was that one of those planes was coming to Las Vegas. So I literally had to call every bureau on the West Coast, get up, go to the airport. We did see the second plane go into the tower. Once it hit the plane hit the Pentagon, I called my now wife, who I think we were engaged to at the time. I said, I don't know what's going on right now. I love you. Turn on the television and hung up. And that was the longest day of work I've worked, from 9:30 at night till 4 o'clock the next afternoon, and then got a couple hours of sleep and came back to work. And I anchored that story. My name did appear on basically that these planes were headed to California. And, we had sent out reporters to different airports and talked to people whose, loved ones were on the plane. I mean, it's a surreal, everybody knows where they were at 9/11. I was just in the thick of it. And, I'll never forget that. And the surreal feeling of having to write a story and it going around the world. So, that's very humbling as well.
How do you stay as calm as you can stay calm on a day like that when there's so much happening? You feel the adrenaline. This is happening to our country. You have a job to do. You have to let people know about these things. Like you said, you called your then fiance. How do you stay calm?
It's always been, I don't try to if I get emotionally involved in a story, and obviously that's a story to get definitely emotionally involved in, I know my work's going to suffer. I just know, because I cry at movies. I know, I know how I'm built, you know what I mean? And it's like, but when I've always reported a story, I could always stay objective, neutral, and just stay focused. There was one story many years ago. It was down here in Orange County, and I literally worked a few blocks away, and this guy ran into a daycare center. I was one of the first ones on the scene, and the police chief came eventually, and he hadn't been golfing or something. He wasn't in his uniform or anything like that. I said, "What's going on? What happened here?" And the guy was still in the car. And he said, "Greg, I can't tell you about it." And he walked away, and he turned back and he whispered in my ear, and he said, "The guy did it on purpose." And I said, "What?" And from that was the one story I have to say my emotions got involved, because it didn't make sense that a guy would purposely run into a daycare center. What had happened was, he used to live in the neighborhood. He had mental health issues. He was jilted by a neighbor. He was driving in that neighborhood one day. He made a U-turn and went right into a daycare center. And it was a chain link fence, and 2 kids died. And you're like, that does not, it didn't comport for me. So that's why my emotions ran deep. And, I wrote a story, the breaking news story that day. We submitted it and won an award. And I've never been big on awards, but I was proud of that one, only because I knew I had been emotionally invested in it. I had talked to the moms for a long time afterwards. We became somewhat friends with the family. And so, that stuff happens, but I can only say that's my one time where I was like, okay, I need to rein my emotions back a little bit.
What have I not asked you that I should be asking you about your time at San Diego State? I want to go 3 different areas. I'm going to same question 3 different ways about San Diego State. What else really stands out that you cherish from your time on the Mesa?
I think the memories were going to the football games. That was the Marshall Faulk era. So going there and being part of that atmosphere. Now we know kids that are going to universities primarily for part of that experience, right? To go to big football games or basketball games, and just to soak that all in. That was really fun. One of the things that I was fortunate enough to do, I think it might have been the first year they offered it. Churchill Downs offered, I think it was 25 college students to go shadow journalists the week before the Kentucky Derby. And myself and a roommate who ended up being a cameraman at KNBC in San Diego, we were picked, and we got to go and watch journalists work and listen in and, talk to trainers and all sorts of stuff. And I thought, wow, this is fascinating. And it was sports journalism. I was still holding on to the hope that maybe I could be a sports journalist one day. So those types of things, working at KCR, DJing, and then calling Aztec football games there for a while, that was really fun. There was just so much opportunity to at San Diego State, and it's even bigger now and more well known and harder to get into and all those things. So I'm very fortunate that I got to go to San Diego State.
Same question about your current job, the LA County District Attorney's Office. What else do people need to know if they're thinking about this path themselves?
I think if you want to get into media relations or public relations, it's important to know the dynamics of the work. And then also, you probably have to cut your teeth at a PR firm or cut your teeth as a journalist so you kind of know what to expect. I mean, my strength was court reporting, I would say. So that's why it was a natural transition for me. But I think at the end of the day, it's important to know that this is a crucial component of how our system works, working for a government agency. And there are those jobs out there. They're actually, I think, quite plentiful. It just depends on what arena you want to work in. It could be public works. It could be probation. It could be any number of agencies that are out there that could provide the opportunity for yourself.
Final topic, I want you to brag about a San Diego State alum. It can be someone you know. It can be someone who you don't know. If you need a few seconds to think about it, I can go first, trying to make this a regular feature so that we can continue to raise the profile and let people know about all the Aztecs who are succeeding and making us proud around the country. If you got somebody, fire away.
I've got two. They're both fraternity brothers. Scott Yaffe, who ran the Chargers PR firm for a while. We haven't talked in a long time. He's got his own PR firm now, and he's in San Diego. Staying in San Diego is a tough thing to do. I tried it and didn't work, so I give much credit to him. And then Josh Rubenstein. He's the vice president and chief operating officer of the Del Mar Thoroughbred Club. I worked at a summer in Del Mar, which was one of my most fun jobs I ever had in San Diego. He's been there since he graduated from San Diego State and has just climbed the ladder. And I haven't talked to him in a long time. It's a funny dynamic if Josh ever gets on this. Josh picked us the top 3 horses in the 1991 Kentucky Derby. And the third place horse was 87-1. And we had our formal in Las Vegas or whatever. And, everybody won a couple $100. I still think Josh thinks to this day, I'm going to come up to him and ask him who to pick. Josh, I'm not. I've grown into my own handicapping ways. I can handicap. We can go toe to toe. I will bet you that I could pick more winners than you. But I just see him sometimes and I just kind of smile. And I think he knows who I am. But he's doing. I mean, that's awesome. He's working at Del Mar. I mean, what better job can you have than working at the track? By the water.
Oh, I love both of those, and especially because I know Scott Yaffe and I've known him for a long time. And he posts a lot of photos of himself paddleboarding in Mission Bay, and then I get jealous of that. Yeah. The alum that I want to spotlight is someone who I just learned about the day that we recorded this. His name is Luis Lopez, and he's a recent graduate. And roughly 1 year ago, he posted on Twitter. Beto Duran is someone I know from Los Angeles, and Beto had posted last year from the Super Bowl a photo of Latino media covering the Super Bowl for English outlets with the idea of hoping that this will continue to grow. And Luis Lopez subtweeted this, and he wrote "one day ... with fingers crossed, the emoji 3 in a row. And then this year's Super Bowl, he was there, he covered it. He was in Glendale to cover the Super Bowl. He recently took a job about 6 months ago working for a station in Yuma, Arizona. And so again, a recent alum. He worked at the Daily Aztec. A year ago, he put it out there that one day he wanted to cover the Super Bowl. And this year he did cover the Super Bowl. So congratulations,
that's awesome.
Luis. All right, Greg, thank you for your time. This was fun. I feel like I could spend 2 hours with you talking about 9/11 and the OJ trial and a whole lot of these other things. Hopefully we can do that in person one day. But once again, this was really illuminating. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Once again, that is Greg Risling, LA County District Attorney's Office, after 2 decades covering a whole lot of different stories for AP, LA Times. He's a 1994 graduate. This is the Where You At podcast, and a friendly reminder to people, we want you to tell us where you're at. We want you to tell us what you're doing. We want you to get involved in the university, mentorship opportunities, just talking to people, spreading the word. It's okay to brag about our school. That's one of the points of this podcast, is to brag about all the great things that are happening at our school and to inspire the next generation. I'm your host, Josh Sushan. Appreciate you listening. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Amy J. Smith from the class of 98. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and the artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know, where you at? Tell us about your career. Get involved in the department. You can donate your time or your money. You can mentor students. You can speak in the classroom, in person or Zoom. You can provide internship opportunities to students. Help us grow the department. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs!